devotees are householders, it turns out to be. Amongst Lord Chaitanya's followers, the vast majority are householders, and only a few are actually renunciates. That doesn't mean that they're not internally sannyasis, as Lord Chaitanya has qualified a life of sannyas as a life dedicated to the service of the Lord. So anyone who is a devotee of the Lord internally is a sannyasi, because a sannyasi means one who abandons all self-centered gratification for satisfying the senses of the Lord. So a grihasta can be such a sannyasi, one who is internally endowed with the let's say, dress of sannyas, as it were.
So why is the Bhagavatam so heavy on this point of household life? We hear over and over again.
Well, for the reasons which I mentioned here.
Against that.
Well, for the reasons that are mentioned here. Generally, it is important to qualify it by saying materialistic household life because, for example, for the reason I'm giving now, Prahlad Maharaj himself remained in householder life. So does that mean he's a materialistic individual? So obviously, it is important to qualify it by saying such. However, the reason the Bhagavatam is heavy on the point, because householder life means Pumsa Striya Maituni Bhavam Etam, the combination of man and woman generally for sex, and from there, Hridaya Granthi Ahu, the heart, not of the heart. The heart, not of the heart means that even if you want to become detached, they may not want to become detached from you. So that's called the heart, not of the heart. It's a hard knot because our relationship to other objects of this world, if we want to give them up, we can easily give them up. They don't remain attached to us. It's like a computer. If you feel tired of the computer, you can throw it away, and it's not going to come crawling back. But another living entity who's under the illusion that they're man or woman, and you're having the opposite conception, you come together based on a misconception of life. It creates what's called the hard knot in the heart. So even if you want to give them up, they may not be prepared to give you up. Prabhupada describes this in that verse. And so it's a hard knot. It's hard to untie it. And the knot becomes even harder. Griha Kshetra Sutapta Vitaya is mentioned. It becomes even harder by expanding it. From there, you get a house, you get family, you get in-laws. That's usually the really heavy one. And then you need money to maintain all these things. Then you have so many social obligations to meet. So that way the knot becomes even tighter. It's already a tight knot enough, and it becomes tighter by these things. Janasya moho yamahamameti. And that way life's illusions of I and mine are expanded. All this is coming from good old household life. So then it tends to make illusion more and more acute. And therefore Bhagavatam will speak very heavily. Oftentimes, these attachments become the main obstacles in our taking the Krishna consciousness. Therefore, the gopis example is so much glorified because they were able to abandon all such expansions of the self-centered ego to serve Krishna. Oftentimes, though, we will struggle with that because we do have our various attachments. They're tightly bound in the heart. And so, therefore, for this reason, Bhagavatam will be very critical of such an existence. But then it should be qualified as an existence separate from Krishna, because the Brajavasis were all themselves householders. This point is also brought up by Lord Brahma in his prayers to Krishna. Is it Lord Brahma? Lord Brahma or Shukadeva Goswami? It's in chapter 14. I don't exactly recall. I think it's Lord Brahma's prayers. And he points out that so long as people do not become your devotees, this is a very beautiful prayer. He says, so long as people do not become your devotees, pure devotees, then their homes remain prisons, their desires remain thieves, and their family attachments remain foot shackles. So it's a very beautiful prayer. And the purport qualifies, so long as they don't become your devotees. And the idea is that the Brajavasis are all householders. So, and Lord Brahma up until that point was glorifying how the Brajavasis were more exalted than the greatest sannyasis in the material world. So then, in the commentary, the point is brought up, well, how can they be the greatest sannyasis when they're all attached to householder life? And then he points out, as long as they're not devotees, then yes, their homes are prisons, their desires are thieves, and so on. But when they become their devotees, all these things become paraphernalia for rendering service to God and actually augments their service to the Supreme Lord. So their householder situation becomes actually exalted as a result of their pure devotion to the Lord. So it is usually important to qualify it by saying materialistic householder life versus. Otherwise, the Brajavasis are sources of criticism. And Prahlad Maharaj himself, who spoke so heavily of householder life, is also a source of criticism for not setting a good example of being a householder who renounces householder life. It turns out that the good example really is to become a pure devotee, rather in this situation or that. That's really the example that needs to be set, an example of devotion to Krishna, like that. Okay, anyone else wants to say anything on that? Okay, so we'll read the next verse because it has a purport. And so it's a prose verse, so I'm not gonna try to recite that. So translation and purport by Srila Prabhupada Ki Jaya. Shukadeva Goswami continued, in the tract of land called Ketumala Varsha, Lord Vishnu lives in the form of Kamadev, only for the satisfaction of his devotees. These include Lakshmiji, the goddess of fortune, the Prajapati Samvatsara, and all of Samvatsara's sons and daughters. The daughters of Prajapati are considered the controlling deities of the nights, and his sons are considered the controllers of the days. The Prajapati's offspring number 36,000, one for each day and each night in the lifetime of a human being. At the end of each year, the Prajapati's daughters become very agitated upon seeing the extremely effulgent disk of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and thus they all suffer miscarriages. Purport: this Kamadev who appears as Krishna's son, named Pradyumna, is Vishnu Tattva. How this is so is explained by Madhvacharya, who quotes from the Brahmanda Purana, Kamadeva Stitam Vishnum Upasate. Although this Kamadeva is Vishnu Tattva, his body is not spiritual but material. Lord Vishnu as Pradyumna or Kamadev accepts a material body, but he still acts spiritually. It does not make any difference whether he accepts a spiritual or material body. He can act spiritually in any condition of existence. Mayavadi philosophers regard even Lord Krishna's body as material, but their opinion cannot impede the spiritual activity of the Lord. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. So this purport is really, I don't know, it's saying that Kamadev we're in Ketu Malavarsha now, and the presiding deity there is Kamadev or Pradyumna, and he's Vishnu Tattva, but his form is being described as a material form here. So I don't know what to say about that. And Prabhupada's quoting, it seems he's quoting the commentary of Madhvacharya, but he doesn't really expand upon that or give clarification for the natural bewilderment that comes up by saying this is Vishnu Tattva, but his body is material. I don't know if I'll be able to comment anything on that, but here, the persons who are worshiping Kamadeva is headed by Prajapati Samvatsara. Samvatsara refers to the year, actually. So Prajapati is considered the presiding deity of the 1 year. So his sons and daughters are the days and nights, respectively. All the days are his sons, all the nights are his daughters. And they're all offering prayers. They will be offering prayers to the Supreme Lord. It's mentioned here that the offspring of the nights all had miscarriages upon seeing the chakra of the Lord. The chakra of the Lord represents the time factor. So when the knights could see the chakra coming, they all had miscarriages. So I looked this up, what is being described, being expressed here. And it was mentioned that the knights' children can signify the seconds and the minutes of the day, and which are all taken away by the time factor. It was also mentioned that the offspring of the knights, their children, can represent the parabdha karma of the living entity by which he enjoys in this world. The parabdha karma by which a living entity is enjoying something in this world now is destroyed by the time factor. So he enjoys it, and then quickly it is destroyed by the time factor. So then the knights, the daughters of Prajapati, who are the knights, when they see that their enjoyment is being destroyed or just about to be destroyed by the time factor, then they have miscarriages. Thus, material existence is a tale of woe, in short. The Krishna says that in the Gita also. From the topmost planet down to the bottommost, all our places are misery because repeated birth and death take place. And this is, of course, due to the influence of the time factor. So material existence is a tale of woe, and therefore they're offering their prayers to the Supreme Lord with the view of gaining devotion to the Lord. That's the purport that has come in other commentary that I have. And Prabhupada's keen in on this point that Kamadev is Pradumna, he's Vishnu Tattva, but he has a material body. And that although he's Vishnu Tattva and possessing a material body, his spiritual activities are not impeded by the material body. He can function in any way. So only thing that can help, only thing I think it could be compared to is that of a pure devotee whose body is also material, let's say strictly speaking. But when the body of the pure devotee is infused with Swarup Shakti of the Lord, it takes on a spiritual nature. And it is not to be viewed materially because it is it is functioning as a spiritual body. The example that I've given last week, which is a very nice example, makes it clear, is just as when you stick an iron rod in fire, the iron rod becomes like fire. And then when you touch that iron rod to cloth, what burns the cloth? Huh? The fire burns the cloth, isn't it? Not the iron rod. The iron rod doesn't have any inherent ability to burn cloth. But when infused with fire, it is the action of the fire that actually burns the cloth. So similarly, the material body itself has no capacity to actually connect with anything spiritual. But when the soul inside a material body contacts the internal energy of Krishna, primarily through the chanting of the holy names of Krishna, the process of devotional service, there's an ingress of the spiritual potency of Krishna more and more and more. And so the body, which is inherently unable to connect with spirit, is able to do so on account of the actions of the internal energy of Krishna. And therefore, such a body is not to be considered material, although it goes through the same, how you say, progression. What is the transformations that a material body will go through? But it is not material because of being infused with the spiritual potency. So I think that's the only thing that this description that Prabhupada is giving here can be likened to. That although Pradumna is Vishnu Tattva, he has a material form, but it doesn't stop spiritual activity. Vishnu Tattva can function in any position. And if he wants to be a rock and do something incredible, he can be a rock, and his activities will not be impeded if he's a rock. Govardhan. Of course, Govardhan is a living entity, so so we don't. So this is the understanding part. Again, he says Mayavadi philosophers may take advantage of this idea. Say, see, he's Vishnu Tattva, but it's a form of Maya. And he says, but even when they see the form of Krishna, they think in that way. But that doesn't impede Krishna's spiritual activities. So that's this verse and the previous verse. Are there any questions on this particular point? Yeah. Yeah. The jiva who's sheltered in the internal energy of Krishna is a mukta, either a bada mukta soul or nitya mukta. Yeah, like that.
I just remember this one fellow's name was Jiva Mukti.
Jiva mukti.
Hare Krishna.
Iha yasya hare dashe. What is the rest of the verse? This is from Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, you know it? Iha yasya hare dashe, karmana manasagira, nikila swapya vastasu, jiva mukta suchate. Jiva mukta is described as one who is Iha yasya hare dashe, one who is rendering service to Lord Hari, karmana manasagira, with his body, mind, and words. Such a person is described.
So my question is, I guess it's a little technical, but we understand the soul has no contact with the material body at all. That's what's illusion, is that the soul has taken the material, the soul has no contact. And then we hear that the soul is suspended in the body by these 6 type of hairs.
Mm-hmm.
So, just in reference to this, if the soul has nothing to do with the material body, then can it really be said that I guess it's accepted a material body, but in one sense, it's always aloof from that body.
Sure.
And then a similar question that I have sometimes, like for example, when you go and bathe in a holy river, then your body is bathing in that river, but the philosophy is that you have zero contact with the body. So how is the soul getting a benefit from that if the body is being in touch with that?
Well, he does have contact with the body by dint of his consciousness being absorbed in it, and also, from what I understand, by the super soul who's facilitating the connection with the soul with that particular false egoistic idea that am this body. In other words, although the soul is constitutionally aloof from the material world because he's the marginal potency of Krishna, whereas the material world is the Maya Shakti of Krishna. So constitutionally, he's aloof. At the same time, he's such a soul is not sheltered in an internal energy. So when he's contacting the material world, he's basically, I don't want to use the word infused. Infused might be a word with Maya Shakti. You know, he's as we say, he's under the influence of the deluding potency of Krishna, and that relationship is made possible by dint of the super soul. Because the souls in this world, as well as this world, are coming from Paramatma or Mahavishnu. And so it is Paramatma who facilitates the connection of the souls with this world and the influence of the deluding potency and so on. So then when they're interacting in this world and they're coming in contact with certain things, then that contact allows the soul's consciousness to become purified. The idea, let me explain it in this way. One reason why the mind needs to be purified in order for the soul to get the real benefit of its spiritual activities is because the soul's perception of things in this world is through the function of the mind. So when the mind is not focused, then the soul doesn't actually perceive anything. Because he's using the mind, he's using the material body, including the subtle body, the mind, to perceive things in this world. So there's a necessity for the mind to be focused and purified so that when the soul is looking through that mind, it actually contacts the purifying substances in this world. A screen, right. So you need the mind to be purified so that when he goes and takes bath in the water, the Ganga, for example, or reads the Bhagavatam or chants the holy name, then the soul is really perceiving what is actually going on and really deeply getting the benefit of that activity. Therefore, when Krishna will say things in the Gita such as, you should always think of me with mind and intelligence fixed on me. Many times Krishna qualifies the remembrance of him by saying that the mind and intelligence should be fixed on him. Well, that's just a material thing. Why does it matter? Because the soul is actually using the subtle body to perceive things in this world. So if the mind and intelligence isn't focused on the activity that it's doing, the soul doesn't get much perception and therefore very minimum purification from that. So whereas when the mind is purified, mode of goodness, as you put it, the screen is clear, he can see into the world where Krishna has provided many purificatory paraphernalia, like Ganga, like the Bhagavatam, and so on. And the soul gets benefit from that. So the main thing is that he's not sheltered in the internal energy. The soul in the material world is not sheltered in the internal energy. So he's influenced by the deluding potency. Although he's aloof from it constitutionally, his consciousness is diluted by the Maya Shakti, and that is made possible because of the super soul, the connection. So that's all I can explain right now. Perhaps there are further technicalities.
Thank you. It made me appreciate more how when we're doing these activities like reading Bhagavatam, we can see the effect when our mind does not hardly get any benefit. You know, you can go through the activities, you can do the whole morning program, but if the mind is not in it.
Or the soul gets minimum benefit when the mind is defocused.
And then our main practice, chanting, we have practical experience that if the mind is not focused, then what benefit are we? You know, we're chanting, we're doing the activity, but the purification is not taking place to a significant degree.
So therefore, the mind is essential. How you say substance in any yoga practice. One really has to get the mind on board. Cheto Darpana Marjadam is described as purifying the mind. You may say, well, why purifying the mind? Why not the soul? Because the mind is really required because the soul is using the mind in this material world to perceive this reality. So we need the help of one needs the help of one's mind. Any other points or comments? Householder life or
Yes.
no?
I guess I was wondering, if you could, maybe you don't want to do this, that's okay, but I'm just wondering where we're picking, because when I left, we were doing the different planetary systems, and then we got into Prahlad's prayers.
Well, one day we finished off one chapter in one day, and well, it was like 2 days. The first few verses were like about hearing and chanting and like that, and then the next was the structure of the universe. So Daita Prabhu gave a PowerPoint based on Sariputa's model, and we just went through the rest of the verses until we finished. We finished at around 8:45 that day. So and then chapter 17 was prayers, and now more prayers. So that's how we. Yeah, another devotee also was bewildered. He said, "When I left, and how did y'all get through the chapters so fast like this?" Okay. Anything else anyone wants to say? Okay. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Gaur Premanandi Hari Bo.